She healed the Alpha's wounds with kindness, but the very next day 100 wolves surrounded her house. Want more shocking twists and dramatic stories? Subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. The storm had been raging for 3 days across the kingdom of Lunaris, and Arya pressed her face against the cold windowpane of her cottage, watching lightning illuminate the ancient pine forest that had been her sanctuary for the past 5 years. The wind howled through the trees like the voices of the dead, and she shivered despite the warm fire crackling behind her. As an Omega without a pack, Arya had learned to read the signs that others missed. Tonight, the forest felt different, charged with more than just electricity from the storm. Her enhanced senses, sharper than most due to her healer's gift, detected something that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the rain-soaked air, growing stronger with each passing moment. She had built her life here on the borderlands, between the territories of the Northern Pack and the Royal Pack, in the neutral zone where rogues and outcasts like herself could exist without persecution. Her cottage, nestled in a clearing surrounded by protective herbs she had cultivated, had become a hidden refuge. The local villagers occasionally sought her healing services, paying in food and supplies, while keeping her secret from the Pack authorities, who would see her exiled status as a threat. Arya's healing abilities were both a blessing and a curse. As an Omega, she possessed the rare gift of accelerated healing touch, but her lack of pack protection made her vulnerable. The High Council had decreed years ago that rogue healers were too dangerous to exist freely. Their abilities could tip the balance of power between rival packs. Yet here she remained, helping those who needed her while staying hidden from those who would use or destroy her. The scent of blood grew stronger, now mixed with something else that made her pulse quicken. Alpha. Not just any Alpha, but one whose power signature felt ancient and overwhelming, like standing too close to a raging wildfire. Arya's hands trembled as she stepped away from the window. Every instinct told her to lock her doors, douse her lights, and pray that whatever conflict was happening in the forest would pass her by. But then she heard it, a low, pained growl that seemed to shake the very foundation of her cottage. The sound was filled with such raw agony that her healer's instincts overrode her sense of self-preservation. Someone was dying out there, and dying badly. Grabbing her leather satchel filled with healing herbs and supplies, Arya threw on her hooded cloak and stepped into the storm. The wind immediately tried to knock her backwards, and the rain stung her face like tiny needles. She followed her nose, the scent of blood, and that overwhelming Alpha presence growing stronger as she made her way through the familiar paths of her forest sanctuary. Lightning flashed again, and in that brief moment of illumination, she saw him. The Alpha lay crumpled against the base of an enormous oak tree, his dark hair matted with blood and rain. Even unconscious and wounded, his presence commanded the very air around him. His clothes were torn and bloody, revealing wounds that would have killed a lesser wolf, but it was his face that made Arya's breath catch in her throat, sharp, aristocratic features that she recognized from the royal portraits that hung in the village inn. Alpha King Chaol Thorne, ruler of all werewolf territories in Lunaris, lay dying in her forest. Arya's mind raced as she knelt beside the fallen Alpha King, her healer's training warring with the survival instincts that had kept her alive as a rogue Omega. Every law of their kind forbade what she was about to do. To touch royalty without permission was punishable by death. To heal an Alpha without pack bonds could be seen as an act of war or manipulation. Yet as she looked at Chaol's pale face and the blood seeping from multiple wounds, her conscience won the battle. "Moon Goddess, help me," she whispered, placing her hands over the worst of his injuries. The moment her skin made contact with his, the world exploded into sensation. Power surged between them like lightning, and Arya gasped as she felt the mate bond snap into place with the force of a physical blow. The golden thread that connected destined pairs wound itself around her heart and pulled tight, claiming her as surely as if she had been marked and mated in the traditional ceremony. But there was no time to process the shocking revelation. Chaol's life force was fading rapidly, and Arya forced herself to focus on channeling her healing energy into his broken body. Her hands glowed with a soft silver light as her Omega powers flowed through the bond and into his wounds. She felt every cut, every broken bone, every torn muscle, as if they were her own injuries. The healing process was more intense than anything she had ever experienced. Usually her power worked gradually, accelerating the body's natural healing over the course of hours or days. But the mate bond amplified her abilities beyond anything she had thought possible. Flesh knitted itself back together under her touch. Broken ribs reformed. The deep gash across his chest sealed itself until only a faint silver scar remained. By the time she finished, Arya was drained and shaking. She had given so much of her energy to heal him that she could barely remain upright. But Cale's breathing had steadied, his color had returned, and the immediate danger had passed. She sat back on her heels, staring at the Alpha King who was also, impossibly, her destined mate. Cale's eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of deep amber that seemed to glow in the darkness. When his gaze focused on her face, Arya saw the exact moment he felt the mate bond settle into place. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, to something that looked almost like fear. "You," he said, his voice rough from pain and exhaustion. Your mate," Arya finished quietly. "I know. I felt it too." Kyle struggled to sit up, and Arya instinctively reached out to steady him. The simple touch sent another jolt of electricity through both of them, confirming what they both knew but neither wanted to acknowledge. The Alpha King's destined mate was a rogue Omega healer living in exile. "This is impossible," Kyle said, though his tone held wonder rather than denial. "I've been searching for my mate for over a decade. The court seers said she would be of noble birth, someone worthy to stand beside a king." Arya pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Your Majesty. I'm nobody special, just a healer trying to survive." But Cale's eyes never left her face, and she could see him taking in every detail. Her silver hair that marked her as born under a full moon, her unusual violet eyes, the way her power still hummed in the air around them. "You're far from nobody," he said softly. "Your healing touch. I've never felt anything like it. Who trained you?" "No one," Arya admitted. "My abilities manifested when I was 15, after my pack was massacred by rogues. I've been learning on my own ever since." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. Kyle's expression grew troubled as he processed the implications of her words. A self-taught Omega healer with power strong enough to heal an Alpha King through a mate bond was unprecedented. Such abilities should have been impossible without proper training and pack support. "What pack did you belong to?" he asked carefully. Arya hesitated, then decided that honesty was her only option now that the mate bond connected them. "The Moonrise Pack. We lived in the mountains north of here before the attack 10 years ago." Kyle's face went pale. The Moonrise Pack was wiped out by shadow wolves. There were no survivors. "There was one," Arya said quietly. "Me. I hid while they killed everyone I loved, and I've been running ever since." Before Kyle could respond, the sound of howls echoed through the forest, dozens of them, growing closer by the minute. His royal guard was tracking him, following his scent through the storm. Arya's sanctuary was about to be discovered, and with it, the secret of the Alpha King's impossible mate. The howls grew closer, and Arya's heart hammered against her ribs as she helped Kyle to his feet. Despite her healing, he was still weak from blood loss and the trauma his body had endured. The mate bond thrummed between them, making her hyper-aware of his every breath, every flicker of pain that crossed his features. "You need to leave," Arya said urgently, pushing against his chest. "If your guard finds you here with me, they'll execute you on sight," Kyle finished grimly. His amber eyes hardened with resolve. "That's not happening." Before Arya could protest, the sound of massive paws thundering through the forest reached them. The royal guard had arrived in their wolf forms, and their presence made the very air vibrate with predatory energy. Arya counted at least 20 distinct scent signatures, all of them powerful alphas and betas sworn to protect their king. Kyle stepped protectively in front of Arya, his body language shifting into the commanding posture of an Alpha King despite his weakened state. When the first of his guards burst through the tree line, a massive black wolf with silver markings, Kale's voice rang out with unmistakable authority. "Stand down, Commander Marcus. All of you, maintain your distance." The black wolf skidded to a halt, yellow eyes fixed on Kale before scanning the area and landing on Arya. She felt the weight of his assessment and knew that her scent, now intertwined with the Alpha King's through their mate bond, would be impossible to hide. The wolf's lips pulled back in a silent snarl, and Arya instinctively took a step backward. More wolves emerged from the forest, forming a loose circle around them. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. and Arya could feel their barely contained aggression. To them, she was a rogue who had dared to touch their king. The fact that she had healed him would mean nothing if they perceived her as a threat. Commander Marcus shifted back to his human form, his transformation fluid and practiced. He was a man in his 40s with graying temples and scars that spoke of countless battles. His gaze never left Arya as he addressed his king. "Your Majesty, we've been searching for you since the Shadow Wolf attack 3 hours ago. Are you injured? Who is this woman?" Kyle's jaw tightened. "I am unharmed thanks to this healer. She saved my life." "A rogue healer," Marcus said, his tone making it clear exactly what he thought of that. "Your Majesty, protocol demands that you follow my orders," Kyle cut him off sharply. "This woman is under my protection." Arya watched the silent communication that passed between the Alpha King and his commander. Marcus's eyes flicked to her again, and she saw the moment he caught the scent of the mate bond. His expression shifted from suspicion to shock, then to something that looked almost like panic. "So, Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this matter privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Kyle replied, though Arya heard the uncertainty beneath his confident tone. The political implications of their bond were clearly weighing on him. "We return to the castle at dawn. The healer comes with us." "I'm not going anywhere," Arya said firmly, finding her voice despite the circle of predators surrounding them. "I have a life here, obligations to the people who depend on me." Kyle turned to face her, and the intensity in his amber eyes made her breath catch. "You're my mate, Arya. That changes everything." "It changes nothing," she shot back, though the mate bond pulled at her heart like a physical chain. "I won't be dragged to court like some prize you've won. I've seen what happens to Omegas in the royal pack. They become decorative breeding stock with no voice and no freedom." The wolves around them shifted restlessly at her defiant words. Speaking to an Alpha King in such a manner was tantamount to treason, but Kyle held up a hand to keep his guards from advancing. "That's not what would happen," he said quietly. "You would be my Lunar Queen. You would have power, influence. I would be a caged bird," Arya interrupted. "Beautiful to look at but unable to fly." Before Kale could respond, a new scent reached them on the wind. More wolves, dozens of them, approaching from multiple directions. But these weren't royal guards. The scent signatures were wild, aggressive, tinged with the madness that marked shadow wolves. Commander Marcus's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring. Shadow wolves incoming from the north and east, at least 30 of them. Kyle cursed under his breath. "They're hunting me." The attack earlier was just the beginning. Arya's mind raced. Shadow wolves were werewolves who had been corrupted by dark magic, turning them into mindless killing machines driven only by bloodlust. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. If they reached her cottage, they would destroy everything in their path. "My cottage," she said urgently. "I have protective wards, supplies. We can make a stand there." Marcus shook his head. "Your Majesty, we should retreat to the main road where our reinforcements can reach us." "No," Kyle said, his eyes meeting Arya's. "The cottage. Lead the way." As they ran through the forest, Arya's healing supplies bouncing in her satchel, she couldn't help but notice how naturally Kyle fell into step beside her, despite his recent injuries. The mate bond sang between them with every shared breath, every synchronized heartbeat. Behind them, 20 royal guards followed in formation, while the howls of shadow wolves grew ever closer. Arya's cottage had never looked smaller than it did with 20 royal guards surrounding it. The building that had been her sanctuary for 5 years suddenly felt fragile and exposed, its protective herb gardens and carved ward stones seeming pitiful against the approaching threat of shadow wolves. "The wards will hold them back temporarily," Arya explained as she led them inside. "But they're not designed for a full assault. Maybe an hour, 2 at most." Kyle surveyed her home with keen eyes, taking in the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the carefully organized shelves of healing supplies, and the books scattered across every available surface. It was the home of someone who had built a life from nothing, and Arya saw something like respect flash across his features. Commander Marcus was all business. "We need sight lines and escape routes. How many exits?" 2, Arya replied. "The front door and a window in the back room that leads to the garden." "Not enough," Marcus muttered, positioning his men at strategic points around the cottage. "We're sitting ducks in here." Through the windows they could see wolves beginning to emerge from the tree line, but these weren't the sleek, powerful forms of normal werewolves. Shadow wolves were corrupted things, their fur patchy and black as tar, their eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. Foam dripped from their muzzles and their movements were twitchy and unpredictable. "How many?" Kyle asked grimly. 50, maybe 60, one of the guards reported from the window, more coming from the east. Arya felt the blood drain from her face. Her wards had been designed to keep out curious villagers and the occasional rogue wolf, not an army of corrupted beasts. As if sensing her thoughts, the first wave of shadow wolves hit her protective barrier with howls of rage. The air around the cottage shimmered as her wards held, but Arya could feel the strain immediately. Each impact sent feedback through the magical connections she had spent years weaving, making her head pound and her hands shake. "The wards are failing faster than I thought," she admitted, pressing her palms against her temples. "The corruption in them is interfering with my magic." Kyle moved to stand beside her, his presence steadying her racing pulse. "What do you need?" "Time," Arya said desperately, "and more power than I have." Without hesitation, Kyle placed his hand over hers. "Take what you need." The moment their skin touched, power flowed between them through the mate bond. Arya gasped as Kyle's alpha energy merged with her omega magic, creating something entirely new. The wards around the cottage flared brighter, strengthened by their combined force. But even as the immediate crisis eased, Arya knew it was only a temporary solution. The shadow wolves continued to circle the cottage, testing the barriers, waiting for any sign of weakness. Through the windows, she could see more of them arriving every minute. "Your Majesty," Marcus said urgently, "reinforcements are at least 2 hours away. We can't hold this position indefinitely." Kyle's expression was grim as he watched the growing army outside. "How many are we looking at now?" "Approaching 100, another guard reported. "And they're not acting randomly. Someone's coordinating them." Arya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm still raging outside. "Shadow wolves don't coordinate. They're mindless." "Not these ones," Kyle said quietly. "Someone's controlling them. Someone who wants me dead badly enough to corrupt an entire pack." The implications hung heavy in the air. This wasn't a random attack. It was an assassination attempt using dark magic. And Arya had placed herself directly in the path of whoever was behind it, by healing the Alpha King. A new sound reached them then, different from the howls of the corrupted wolves. It was a voice, speaking in the ancient tongue used for dark magic. The words made Arya's skin crawl and her wolf whimper in fear. "What is that?" Marcus demanded. Arya's face went pale as she recognized the ritual cadence. "Someone's trying to break the wards from the inside out. If they succeed..." Her words were cut off as the cottage shuddered, the magical protections wavering visibly. Outside, the shadow wolves began to press closer, sensing weakness. "How long?" Kyle asked tersely. Arya closed her eyes, feeling the threads of her magic being systematically unraveled by whatever dark sorcerer was working against them. "Minutes, maybe less." Kyle's hand tightened on hers, their mate bond pulsing with shared determination. "Then, we make our stand here, all of us together." Through the windows, 100 pairs of red eyes stared back at them, waiting for the moment when the wards would fall and the real battle would begin. Arya's sanctuary was about to become a battleground, and she could only pray that they would all survive what was coming. The ancient words of the dark ritual grew louder, echoing through the forest with a power that made the very air vibrate. Arya could feel her carefully woven protections unraveling thread by thread, each severed connection sending spikes of pain through her skull. The cottage walls themselves seemed to pulse with the strain of maintaining the failing wards. 30 seconds, she gasped, blood trickling from her nose as the magical backlash intensified. Maybe less. Kale's grip on her hand tightened, his alpha power flowing into her in steady waves. Guards, defensive positions. Remember, protect the healer at all costs. Commander Marcus nodded grimly, directing his men to strategic points throughout the small cottage. Windows were hastily barricaded with furniture, doorways reinforced with whatever materials they could find. The royal guards shifted partially into their wolf forms, maintaining human intelligence while gaining enhanced strength, speed, and claws. Outside, the shadow wolves had grown completely still, their corrupted forms creating a perfect circle around the cottage. In the eerie silence, Arya could count exactly 100 pairs of glowing red eyes staring back at them. The sight sent ice through her veins. It was no coincidence that their number matched the ancient ritual requirements for a blood sacrifice. "They're not just here to kill us," she whispered, realization dawning. "They're here to complete a summoning ritual. 100 corrupted souls surrounding their sacrifice." Kale's expression darkened. "What kind of summoning?" Before Arya could answer, the final thread of her ward magic snapped with an audible crack that echoed through the cottage. The protective shimmer around the building died, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then chaos erupted. The shadow wolves attacked as one, a wave of corrupted fury that crashed against the cottage walls with inhuman strength. Claws raked against wood, teeth snapped at windows, and the sound of splintering timber filled the air. The royal guards met the assault with fierce determination, their own claws and fangs flashing as they fought to keep the monsters at bay. Arya pressed herself against the far wall, her healing supplies clutched in her hands as she watched the battle unfold. A shadow wolf crashed through the front window, its red eyes fixed on her with single-minded hunger. Before it could reach her, Kyle intercepted it with a roar that shook the cottage foundations. The Alpha King's transformation was magnificent and terrifying. His wolf form was massive, silver-black fur rippling over muscles that spoke of royal bloodlines and centuries of breeding for war. His amber eyes blazed with protective fury as he tore into the corrupted wolf, ending its existence with efficient brutality. But for every shadow wolf they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The cottage walls were being systematically torn apart, and Arya knew they had minutes at most before the building collapsed entirely. "The back window!" Marcus shouted over the sounds of battle. "We need to break through their lines!" "No," Arya called back, an idea forming in her desperate mind. "The garden! My emergency cache! There are supplies there that might help." She had spent years preparing for the possibility that her sanctuary might be discovered. Hidden beneath the herb garden was a collection of her most potent healing drafts, including some that could temporarily enhance a werewolf's natural abilities. Kyle, still in his wolf form, positioned himself between Arya and the chaos as she made her way toward the back of the cottage. His presence at her side sent waves of reassurance through their mate bond, giving her the courage to focus on what needed to be done. The back window exploded inward just as they reached it, another shadow wolf lunging through the opening with slavering jaws. Arya didn't think, she simply acted, throwing herself forward and pressing her hands against the creature's corrupted hide. Her healing magic, designed to mend and restore, reacted violently to the dark energy infecting the wolf. Instead of healing, her power burned through the corruption like acid, purging the darkness from the creature's system. The shadow wolf collapsed, its red eyes fading to normal brown before going vacant in death. The effort left Arya drained and shaking, but the knowledge of what she had just accomplished sent adrenaline surging through her system. Her healing magic could counter the corruption, if she could get close enough to use it. "I can cleanse them," she gasped to Kale, who had shifted back to human form to help her through the window. "My healing power burns out the dark magic, but I have to touch them." Kyle's expression was incredulous. "That's suicide. There are too many of them." "Not if I can amplify my power," Arya said, dropping to her knees beside a seemingly ordinary patch of herbs. Her fingers found the hidden latch beneath the soil, revealing a small cache filled with glass vials. "Enhancement drafts, they'll boost our natural abilities temporarily." She grabbed 3 vials of shimmering silver liquid, pressing one into Kale's hands. "This will triple your alpha strength and speed for about 10 minutes, long enough to clear a path." Kyle stared at the enhancement draft in his hands, then at Arya's determined face. Around them, the sounds of battle grew more desperate as his guards fought against increasingly overwhelming odds. The cottage was collapsing, pieces of the roof caving in as shadow wolves tore through the structure with supernatural strength. "If we do this, there's no going back," he warned. "Using enhancement magic in battle creates a blood bond between wolves. We'll be connected beyond just the mate bond." Arya met his gaze steadily. "Then we'll be stronger together." Without hesitation, they drank the drafts simultaneously. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Arya felt power surge through her system like liquid fire, her healing abilities magnifying beyond anything she had ever experienced. Beside her, Kyle's transformation into his alpha form was more fluid and powerful than before, his wolf now radiating an aura of command that made even the corrupted shadow wolves hesitate. The blood bond snapped into place alongside their mate bond, creating a connection so intimate that Arya could feel Chaol's thoughts, his emotions, his very heartbeat as if they were her own. She knew without being told that he could sense her power, her determination, her absolute trust in him. "Together," Chaol said, his mental voice clear in her mind through their new connection. They moved as one entity, Chaol's enhanced speed carrying them both into the heart of the Shadow Wolf pack, while Arya's amplified healing magic blazed around them like a silver flame. Every corrupted wolf that came within reach of her touch was instantly purged of darkness, the cleansing fire of her power burning through them faster than they could regenerate. The shadow wolves began to fall back, their red eyes flickering with what might have been fear, but the dark voice chanting the ritual grew louder, more desperate, as if whoever was controlling them realized their plan was failing. "The ritual master," Arya gasped as she cleansed another wolf, her enhanced senses now able to track the source of the dark magic. "He's close. In the forest, about 50 yards north." Chaol's wolf form pivoted toward the tree line, his amber eyes scanning the darkness. Through their bond, Arya felt his predatory focus lock onto a target hidden among the shadows. "There," his mental voice growled, "behind the old oak. I can smell his corruption from here." But between them and their target stood the remaining shadow wolves, now formed into a defensive wall around their master. The corrupted creatures had abandoned their mindless assault and were working with tactical precision, protecting the sorcerer who controlled them. "We need a distraction," Arya realized, "something to break their formation." The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Marcus and the remaining royal guards burst through the ruins of the cottage, their own enhancement drafts consumed and their wolf forms blazing with renewed power. The coordinated assault from multiple directions threw the shadow wolves into chaos. "Now!" Chaol's mental roar filled Arya's mind. They charged through the gap in the defensive line, Arya riding on Chaol's back as his enhanced speed carried them toward the ritual master. The dark sorcerer was exactly what she had expected, a gaunt figure in tattered robes, his eyes black with corruption and his hands weaving patterns in the air that made reality itself seem to bend. When he saw them approaching, his chanting shifted into something darker, more urgent. The remaining shadow wolves began to converge on their position, but it was too late. Arya leaped from Chaol's back, her hands blazing with silver fire as she reached for the sorcerer. The moment her enhanced healing magic made contact with his corrupted flesh, the reaction was explosive. Dark energy and pure healing power clashed in a maelstrom of light and shadow that lit up the entire forest. The sorcerer's scream of agony was cut short as Arya's power burned through him, purging years of accumulated dark magic in seconds. His death severed the connection to the remaining shadow wolves, who collapsed as the corruption was ripped from their systems. In the sudden silence that followed, Arya found herself kneeling in a circle of ash where the sorcerer had been, her body shaking from magical exhaustion. The enhancement draft was wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and drained. Chaol shifted back to human form and gathered her into his arms, their bond singing with shared relief and triumph. Around them, the forest was littered with the bodies of cleansed wolves, their corrupted forms returned to their natural state in death. "It's over," he murmured against her hair, though they both knew this was only the beginning. The attack had been too coordinated, too well planned to be the work of a single rogue sorcerer. Someone with significant power and resources wanted the Alpha King dead, and they had just painted a target on Arya's back by revealing the extent of her abilities. As dawn broke over the ruins of her cottage, Arya realized that her life as a hidden healer was over. The mate bond, the blood bond, and the display of her enhanced powers meant that she was now part of something much larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The question was whether she was ready for what came next. The royal convoy that arrived at dawn was unlike anything Arya had ever seen. 50 elite guards in gleaming armor, their wolves bearing the silver and gold colors of the crown, surrounded a carriage that looked more like a mobile fortress. Behind them came supply wagons, medics, and what appeared to be half the royal court. Arya stood in the ruins of her cottage, watching the impressive display of wealth and power with growing unease. Her simple life as a hidden healer felt like a distant memory as she observed the political machinery of the werewolf kingdom in motion. "Quite a show," she murmured to Chaol, who stood beside her looking every inch the Alpha King despite his torn and bloodied clothes. Word travels fast in the capital, Kyle replied grimly. By now every noble family, every rival pack and every political faction knows that I've found my mate. They're all wondering what this means for the balance of power. Chancellor Aldrich emerged from the lead carriage, his silver hair immaculate despite the early hour, and his pale blue eyes sharp with calculation. He was followed by Lady Vivienne Blackthorne, the Alpha King's chief advisor and rumoured former lover, whose beauty was matched only by her ruthless political acumen. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Aldrich said with a bow that somehow managed to convey both respect and disapproval, "we are relieved to find you safe. When we received word of the Shadow Wolf attack—" "I'm fine, thanks to my mate's intervention," Kyle said firmly, his hand finding Arya's and intertwining their fingers. The gesture was clearly deliberate, a public claim that couldn't be misinterpreted. Lady Vivienne's green eyes fixed on Arya with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "The rogue healer, I presume. How fortunate that you happened to be in the right place at the right time." The words were polite, but Arya heard the underlying threat clearly. She was being assessed, judged, and found wanting by the woman who had clearly expected to be standing at Kyle's side when he finally claimed a mate. "Lady Vivienne?" Kyle's voice carried a warning edge. "Arya saved my life and proved herself in battle against a coordinated assassination attempt. She has my protection and my respect." "Of course, Your Majesty," Vivienne replied smoothly. "I'm simply concerned about the implications of such an unprecedented situation. The High Council will have many questions." Chancellor Aldrich stepped forward, his expression grave. "Indeed. Your Majesty, with respect, the discovery of your mate has created a political crisis. 3 separate pack alliances have already sent envoys demanding audiences. The Southern Territories are questioning whether an unknown Omega can be trusted with the power of Lunar Queen. And the Eastern clans—" he paused significantly. "They're calling for a formal challenge." Arya felt Kyle's hand tighten on hers, their blood bond carrying his surge of protective anger. "A challenge? On what grounds?" "They claim that a rogue with no pack lineage cannot be considered worthy of the crown," Aldrich explained. "According to ancient law, any werewolf can challenge the right of a royal mate if they believe the union threatens the stability of the kingdom." "That's ridiculous," Arya said, finding her voice despite the intimidating crowd of nobility surrounding them. "I never asked for any of this. I was perfectly content living my own life." Lady Vivienne's smile was sharp as a blade. "But that choice is no longer yours to make, is it? The moment you accepted the mate bond with an Alpha King, you became a political figure. Your personal desires are now secondary to the needs of the kingdom." The casual dismissal of her autonomy sent anger flashing through Arya's system. "I didn't accept anything. The mate bond isn't a choice. It simply is. And I won't be treated like a prize to be claimed or a pawn to be moved around a political board." "Brave words," Chancellor Aldrich said mildly, "but the reality remains that the kingdom requires stability. If your presence creates more chaos than unity, perhaps it would be better for all concerned if you withdrew from court life." Kyle's low growl made several of the nobles step backward. "Arya is my mate, and your future Lunar Queen. Anyone who has a problem with that can address their concerns to me directly." "Your Majesty," Commander Marcus approached, having overseen the cleanup of the battle site. "We've finished examining the sorcerer's remains. You need to see this." He held out a tattered piece of parchment, partially burned but still readable. Kyle took it, his expression growing darker as he read. "What is it?" Arya asked. "Orders," Kyle said grimly, "written in the Eastern clan dialect. Someone hired that sorcerer specifically to kill me during my patrol route. This wasn't a random attack. It was a coordinated assassination attempt." Lady Vivienne's face went pale. "The Eastern clans? But they're the ones calling for a challenge." "Exactly." Kyle's voice was deadly quiet. "They tried to kill me, and when that failed, they're using political means to remove the mate who saved my life. It's a two-pronged attack on the crown." Chancellor Aldrich studied the parchment with growing alarm. "If this is true, we're looking at treason on a massive scale. The Eastern clans command nearly a quarter of our military forces." Arya felt the weight of political intrigue settling around her like a suffocating blanket. What had started as a simple healing had spiraled into a conspiracy that threatened the entire kingdom. And somehow, she had become the center of it all. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Kale's amber eyes met hers, filled with determination and something that might have been love. Now we go to the capital. We face the challenge, expose the conspiracy, and show them exactly what kind of Lunar Queen you're meant to be. The royal carriage was more luxurious than anything Arya had ever experienced, but it felt like a gilded cage as they traveled toward the capital city of Lunaris. Soft velvet cushions, crystal decanters filled with fine wine, and windows of actual glass, all the trappings of wealth that she had never desired or needed. Kyle sat across from her, reviewing reports and correspondence that had arrived with the convoy. The blood bond between them hummed with his tension and frustration as he dealt with the political fallout of their mating. Through their connection, Arya could feel the weight of responsibility that pressed down on him constantly. "Tell me about the challenge," she said, needing to understand what they were facing. Kyle looked up from his papers, his expression grim. "It's an ancient law, dating back to the founding of the kingdom. Any werewolf can formally question the worthiness of a royal mate if they believe the union threatens the stability of the realm. The challenge takes the form of 3 trials: combat, wisdom, and leadership." "Combat?" Arya's stomach dropped. "I'm a healer, not a warrior." "The trials can be adapted," Kyle assured her quickly. "Combat doesn't necessarily mean physical fighting. It can test your ability to protect what matters, to make hard choices under pressure. And if I fail?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Arya closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. A week ago, her greatest concern had been whether she had enough healing supplies to last the winter. Now she was expected to prove herself worthy of ruling an entire kingdom. "There's something else," Kyle said quietly. "The trials aren't just about testing your worthiness. They're designed to break the mate bond if the challenger succeeds. Ancient magic woven into the very fabric of our laws." Arya's eyes snapped open. "Break the bond? Is that even possible?" "With enough power and the right ritual, yes. The Eastern clans have access to old magic, dark knowledge that most of us have forgotten." Kyle's hands clenched into fists. "They're not just trying to remove you from the throne. They're trying to destroy our connection entirely." The carriage hit a bump in the road, and Arya used the moment to study Kyle's face. Despite the political crisis, despite the danger they were facing, she could see genuine pain in his eyes at the thought of losing their bond. "You care about me," she said softly. "It wasn't a question." "More than I should after knowing you for less than a day," Kyle admitted. "The mate bond creates instant connection, but what I feel for you goes beyond magical compulsion. You're brave, selfless, powerful in ways you don't even understand. You saved my life without hesitation, even knowing the consequences. And you protected me without question," Arya replied, "even when it put your throne at risk." Their eyes met across the carriage, and Arya felt the truth settle between them like a bridge being built stone by stone. What had started as a magical bond was becoming something deeper, more real. "We barely know each other," she said. "I know that you chose to heal rather than hide," Kyle replied. "I know that you faced down 100 corrupted wolves without flinching. I know that your first thought when the sorcerer died was concern for the innocents who had been corrupted, not celebration of your victory." The carriage began to slow, and through the window, Arya caught her first glimpse of the capital city. Lunaris was magnificent, white stone towers that seemed to pierce the clouds, broad avenues lined with trees that glowed with subtle magic, and everywhere the signs of a prosperous, thriving civilization. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's yours," Kyle said simply. "If you want it, if you're willing to fight for it." Arya thought about her destroyed cottage, her simple life that was already gone forever. She thought about the villagers who had depended on her healing, now left without her help. She thought about the political games and court intrigue that awaited her. Then she thought about the Shadow Wolves, the corruption that had nearly destroyed innocent people, and the conspiracy that threatened everything Kyle had worked to build. She thought about the power she had discovered within herself, the ability to cleanse darkness and bring healing to those who needed it most. "The trials," she said finally. "When do they begin?" Kyle's smile was fierce with pride and determination. "Tomorrow at sunset. The full moon will give you access to your strongest abilities. Then we have tonight to prepare." Arya straightened her shoulders, feeling resolve crystallize within her. "Tell me everything I need to know about werewolf politics, ancient law, and the enemies we're facing." As their carriage rolled through the gates of the royal palace, Arya caught sight of the crowds that had gathered to witness the arrival of their future Lunar Queen. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism, and more than a few displayed open hostility. Tomorrow she would face 3 trials that would determine not just her worthiness to rule, but the fate of her bond with Kyle, and possibly the future of the entire kingdom. Tonight, she would transform from a rogue healer into whatever she needed to become to protect the man she was rapidly falling in love with and the people who would depend on her strength. The real test was about to begin. The amphitheater built into the heart of the royal palace was ancient beyond measure, its stone walls carved with runes that pulsed with power under the full moon's light. Thousands of werewolves filled the circular seating, their eyes reflecting the magical illumination as they watched the proceedings with hungry anticipation. Arya stood in the center of the arena, wearing the traditional white robes of a challenged mate. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, too fine and formal for someone who had spent years in simple healer's garments. Around her neck hung the Luna's pendant, a silver moonstone that would amplify her natural abilities during the trials. Across from her stood Lord Cassius Blackthorn, Lady Vivian's elder brother and the champion chosen by the Eastern clans to issue the challenge. He was an imposing figure, tall, powerfully built, with the silver hair and pale blue eyes that marked the Blackthorn lineage. His presence radiated the confidence of someone who had never lost a formal duel. "The first trial begins," announced the High Priestess, her voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the amphitheater. "The trial of protection. The challenged must demonstrate the ability to safeguard those under her care. Let the test commence." The arena floor shimmered and changed, ancient magic transforming the space into a replica of a village under attack. Illusory buildings rose from the stone, populated by magical constructs that looked and moved like real werewolves. Elderly pack members, children, pregnant mothers, all the vulnerable members of a community who would look to their Luna for protection. But the threats were real enough. Shadow creatures, summoned and controlled by the trial magic, began emerging from the edges of the arena. Unlike the corrupted wolves they had faced in the forest, these beings were pure darkness given form, driven by a single purpose: to destroy everything in their path. "You have 1 hour," Lord Cassius called out, his voice carrying clearly across the transformed space. "Save as many as you can, Omega. Show us if you're truly worthy to protect an entire kingdom." Arya's mind raced as she assessed the situation. There were at least 50 villages scattered throughout the magical construct, and the shadow creatures were approaching from multiple directions. She couldn't be everywhere at once, couldn't heal fast enough to counter the damage that was coming, but she didn't need to fight this battle alone. Closing her eyes, Arya reached out through the blood bond she shared with Kyle. Even though he sat in the royal box, forbidden from interfering directly, their connection allowed her to draw on his strength and tactical knowledge. Through their link, she felt his absolute faith in her abilities. "Trust yourself," his mental voice whispered. "You're more powerful than you know." Arya opened her eyes and raised her hands, silver light beginning to pulse from her palms. But instead of trying to heal the villagers one by one, she did something that had never been attempted in the history of the trials. She created a protective barrier around the entire village. The shield of healing energy spread outward from her position, forming a dome of silver light that encompassed all the threatened civilians. When the shadow creatures struck the barrier, they didn't just bounce off. They were purified by contact with her magic, dissolving back into harmless darkness. Gasps echoed through the amphitheater as the assembled werewolves witnessed something unprecedented. Arya wasn't just protecting the villagers. She was eliminating the threats entirely through the sheer power of her healing magic. But maintaining such a large-scale protection spell was draining her rapidly. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she poured more and more energy into the barrier, feeling her reserves depleting with each passing minute. "Hold on," Kyle's voice urged through their bond. "You're doing something impossible. Show them what a true Luna can accomplish." More shadow creatures emerged, larger and more aggressive than the first wave. They hammered against Arya's barrier with increasing fury, causing cracks to appear in the silver light. She gritted her teeth and pushed harder, drawing on reserves she didn't know she possessed. Then she felt it, other sources of power beginning to flow into her magic. In the audience, werewolves throughout the amphitheater were offering their own energy to strengthen her barrier. Pack members who had never seen her before were choosing to trust her, to support her efforts to protect the innocent. The gesture sent emotion flooding through Arya's chest. These people were accepting her not because of her bloodline or political connections, but because of her actions. They were choosing to follow a Luna who would sacrifice herself to protect others. With the added power from her newfound supporters, Arya's barrier blazed brighter than ever. The remaining shadow creatures disintegrated on contact, unable to penetrate the combined will of Aluna and her people. When the last threat was eliminated, the magical village faded away, leaving only Arya standing in the center of the arena. She swayed on her feet, exhausted but victorious, as the crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Lord Cassius's expression was unreadable as he approached. The first trial is complete. The Omega has demonstrated exceptional protective abilities. His pause was meaningful. However, 2 trials remain. The second trial began at midnight, when the moon reached its zenith and bathed the arena in ethereal silver light. This time, the space transformed into a replica of the royal throne room, complete with advisors, nobles, and a complex political crisis that required immediate resolution. The trial of wisdom, the High Priestess announced. The challenged must demonstrate the judgment and intelligence necessary to rule. A kingdom in crisis awaits your leadership. Arya found herself seated on a throne that felt both magnificent and terrifying, facing a council of magical constructs that presented her with an impossible situation. A plague was spreading through the eastern territories, but the only cure required rare herbs that grew exclusively in lands controlled by a hostile neighboring kingdom. Traditional diplomacy had failed. Military action would mean war with unpredictable consequences, and every day of delay meant more deaths. Lord Cassius, now playing the role of a skeptical advisor, leaned forward with a challenging smile. "What does our Luna propose? How do you solve a crisis with no good options?" Arya studied the faces around her, her mind working through the political implications. This wasn't just about finding a solution. It was about demonstrating the kind of leader she would become. The easy answers would all lead to greater problems down the road. "Tell me about the plague," she said finally. "Not just the symptoms, but its origins. When did it first appear and where?" The magical advisors exchanged glances before one answered. 3 months ago, in a mining settlement near the border. It spreads through contact with contaminated water sources. And the herbs we need, they grow in what specific region of the neighboring kingdom? The Moonfall Valley, sacred to their earth spirits. They believe harvesting from those lands would anger their gods. Arya nodded, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "Then we don't ask for the herbs. We ask for help with the real problem." Lord Cassius frowned. "Explain." "The plague originated near a mining operation, spreads through water, and requires herbs that grow in sacred lands tied to earth spirits," Arya said, standing from the throne. "This isn't a natural disease. It's environmental contamination being masked as illness. The mining is poisoning the water table, and the herbs don't cure the plague so much as they neutralize the toxins." Murmurs rippled through the construct advisors as they processed her reasoning. "What do you propose?" one asked. "We offer to share our mining technology and environmental restoration techniques with the neighboring kingdom, in exchange for their help identifying the contamination source. We frame it not as begging for their resources, but as offering a partnership to solve a problem that could spread to their lands if left unchecked. And if they refuse," Lord Cassius pressed, "then we develop alternative solutions while proving our good faith," Arya replied confidently. "And we send our own healers to work directly with their earth spirits, showing respect for their beliefs, while demonstrating our commitment to solving the problem rather than just treating symptoms." The trial space shimmered as the magical constructs evaluated her response. When the throne room faded away, Lord Cassius was staring at her with something that might have been respect. "Clever," he admitted. "You've turned a crisis of scarcity into an opportunity for alliance." The second trial is complete, but as they prepared for the final trial, Arya could feel the weight of anticipation from the crowd. The trial of leadership would be the most challenging, and she suspected it would test more than just her ability to command. The arena transformed one last time, creating a battlefield where she faced not constructs or magical challenges, but the assembled leaders of the Eastern clans themselves. This was where the real game would be played. "The final trial," the High Priestess announced. "The trial of leadership. The challenged must prove she can unite a divided kingdom and lead her people through their darkest hour." Lord Cassius stepped forward, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a dozen other clan leaders, their faces hard with suspicion and challenge. "You've shown you can protect and reason," he said. "Now show us you can lead wolves who have no reason to follow you." Arya felt Kael's presence through their bond, his unwavering support giving her strength. But she knew this final test would require her to stand on her own, to prove that she was worthy not just of being his mate, but of being their queen. She looked out at the faces surrounding her, some hostile, some curious, all of them waiting to see what kind of leader she would choose to become. In that moment, Arya realized that everything had led to this. Her years of healing in exile, the attack that brought her and Kael together, the bonds they had forged in battle, and the political intrigue that had tried to tear them apart. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward to claim her destiny as Luna Queen, ready to prove that sometimes the most powerful leaders are those who never sought power in the first place. "I am Arya," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the arena. "I am a healer, a mate, and if you'll have me your Luna Queen, let me show you what we can build together." The final battle for her crown was about to begin.